This week's Parsha is Parshas Balak. Parshas Balak discusses the prophet that was granted by God to the Gentile nations of the world. The Medrash explains that the Gentile nations were complaining, will complain in the future, that it's unfair that the Jewish people were chosen as their nation. Because if we would have experienced a prophet as great as Moshe, then we also would have become such great people, and been deserving of receiving the Torah and becoming your chosen nation. If you would have given us a chance to be like the Jewish people, we would have been just as holy and just as pious as they are. Therefore, Hashem, retrospectively, gives the Gentile nations a prophet as great as Moshe, and that was Bilam. Shimshon Pincus asks a extraordinary question, which really gives a whole new light to what we spoke of before. Bilam, as we see throughout the Parsha, was a terrible person. He was not pious, he was not holy in any way, shape, or form, at least during the story that occurs in this Parsha. It seems like he has a spirit of prophecy that it is totally undeserving, and the prophecy seems not to affect his character whatsoever. Now, how is the response of Hashem to the complaint of the Gentile nations valid? Why is it considered a good answer? Yes, he gave a person in their nation a spirit of prophecy, but that person was nowhere as pious or as holy or as scholarly as Moshe was. Moshe was humble more than any other person on earth. And Bilam seems like almost he was more haughty than any other person on earth. He was evil, he was immoral, and for some reason, he is the one who Hashem decides is going to be the adequate retort to the Gentile nations saying that it's not fair, you didn't give us a fair chance. So the answer to this question, Shimshon Pincus says, is that a prophet will only be granted prophecy based on the nation who he represents. When we think about Moshe as the leader of the Jewish nation, of course Moshe himself personally was an extremely great person, and his personal achievements were phenomenal. But he could have never received the spirit of prophecy that he had without being representative of a nation with at least the potential to be great. Moshe's piety, his scholarliness, his personal character were all refined. But even with all of that, if the nation itself would have been corrupted, his prophecy would be flawed. And his prophecy would have not been inculcated into his very being, to become the leader who he was, to make the Jewish nation who they are today. So Bilam himself, perhaps, Shimshon Pincus says, was a very good character before he became a prophet. Maybe that's why Hashem chose him. Maybe he was very pious and very, very caring and very moral before he received the spirit of prophecy. But because they were trying to inject into a utensil which was totally inappropriate, the spirit of prophecy because of who he represented, Bilam, therefore, the spirit of prophecy itself totally corrupted him. That's the reason why it's an adequate answer to the Gentile nations, that they were given a chance, but they themselves corrupted the prophet that they were given. And because of who they were, their prophet became more evil than any other person. A question that always bothered me on this week's Parsha is that Bilam is asked by Balak, King Balak, to curse the Jewish people, use his prophetic powers to curse the Jewish people, to destroy them with that curse. Now, throughout the story, at least 3 times, if not 4 or 5 times, there is this give and take between Bilam the prophet and Balak the king. Balak says, go and curse the Jewish people. Bilam says, I can't do anything else but what Hashem tells me to do. No matter what I do, I cannot control what I'm going to say. Then, of course, Bilam tries to say a curse and destroy the Jewish people, but Hashem puts the words in his mouth and he says a blessing. And so happens again and again and again. And what's amazing is that Balak's reaction every single time is the same. Balak says, I contracted you to curse the Jewish people, to destroy the Jewish people, and here you are blessing them. And he gives that same response over and over again. And the question is, what in the world was King Balak thinking? In the beginning of the parsha, there are hints to the fact that King Balak was a very wise person. So why would he not realize the failure of this idea of destroying the Jewish nation via Bilam the prophet's cursing, if it failed over and over again? And why would he show surprise at the outcome? It happened before already, and 2 times before. So why would Balak be surprised by what had happened, and why would he keep on trying and trying again? Have a good Shabbos.